Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Hope everyone's having a great day. I'm Mary Crean. I'm here with Neal Shah. Many refer to him as America's Chief Elder Officer. That's pretty impressive. He's also the CEO and co-founder of CareYaya. Love to hear more about that name. He's a former rising star hedge fund manager who's in his mid-30s. He was managing $250 million fund when suddenly he became a caregiver and then decided to redirect his life and work to supporting caregivers. And he has a wonderful and heart-wrenching and heartwarming story. Neal, welcome to the Prime Life Podcast. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mary. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I would say kind of my first word to describe myself is I am a caregiver. I've been a caregiver and I likely will be a caregiver. And, maybe someday I'll even need care. I kind of have a non-traditional background in the caregiving community. In my 20s, I was on Wall Street and, joined the hedge fund industry at 23 and became a partner at a multi-billion-dollar fund when I was 27. And very quickly, by my early 30s, one of the investors approached me to start my own fund. So I was kind of in the fund business and I was investing across industries, including healthcare and technology. And, I was quite good at it. While I was accelerating my career and built my fund from nothing to 250 million, by the time I was 35, I had two major caregiving experiences, starting in my early 30s and then my mid 30s. In my early 30s for my grandfather going through dementia, kidney failure, cancer, and then end of life care, where really I was care coordinating within my family. But my mother ended up leaving her career to be the full-time caregiver because just the quality of the care we received, we were not thrilled with and we felt really guilty. So, she was like, I'll do it myself. And that opened my eyes for the first time in my life to how difficult this is on, so many people and all the years of caregiver support groups and just meeting all these other people and seeing them struggling. And then at the peak of my fund career, I became a primary caregiver for my wife as she went through a multi-year cancer battle. And it was really difficult. I ended up taking a lot of sabbaticals from my work to manage her care. And ultimately, I just tapped out and shut down my fund and, did it full time because I thought it would have a great impact on the outcome. And, yet again, I was very dissatisfied with the quality of the care help that we were able to get. And so I was like, okay, why not do it? And I'd worked really hard to get to that point in my career. So it was like multiple aspects of it were very difficult to deal with. But after, thankfully, knock on wood, she finally had a successful outcome and has now been in remission for several years. At that point, I was almost 40 and I was like, okay, this is a major problem across the country. So many family caregivers are dealing with the situation. And I was like, how can I redirect my talents and my energy and the rest of my life and work to improving things for caregivers out there? That was a catalyst for a big shift in my career and my work. And, while I was good at what I did before, I find a lot more meaning and purpose in the work I do now because it's directly helping many people's lives who are in very difficult situations.
Well, let's start by saying this. You're obviously a very kind and compassionate human and an amazing family member.
Thank you.
Because not everyone would do that. They just wouldn't. And I commend you for that. And I love what you've done with your company. But I am curious. The first question is, tell us about the name.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the name has multiple meanings, but I wanted to pick something positive. A lot of people who are doing caregiving for an aging family member or even somebody going through serious illness, a lot of the care help, the names sometimes are like a little bit downbeat. So I wanted something uplifting. So it's just the word "ya" twice. But also, Yaya means grandmother in Greek, also means caregiver in Hindi and Swahili and Thai. So it has like that multiple kind of meaning and connotation. Yaya is an acronym for You Are Your Advocate, which I believe is the future of self-directed care. and something that's been lacking kind of as an option for many consumers in the care market. So yeah, fun, playful, multiple meanings, acronym, all of the above.
Well, what you said is very interesting because you're right. A lot of the names are very kind of depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And this name is not depressing. And I know that you bring a lot of inspiration and positivity to this, but let's talk about something that maybe is a little bit concerning. How big is this caregiving crisis and how many people is it impacting?
Yeah, it's really massive. Latest survey data shows 63 million Americans are caregiving for a loved one, and many of those are caregiving for an aging parent or a spouse with serious illness, doing over 15 plus hours a week of unpaid care, on top of their job and other responsibilities. Wow. Approximately, I think that's a little bit over 1 in 5 American adults are in this situation. A lot of estimations have been done on what is the value of this unpaid care that people provide. On the lower end of it, it's around 600 to 800 billion per year.
Wow.
I've seen estimates as high as 2 trillion. So it's kind of crazy that our economy has this massive hidden portion of the economy, quote unquote, that is just work people are doing that they're not paid for and compensated for, but that they're spending a tremendous amount of time and stress on. So it is a huge, huge crisis. And I believe, I think beyond our work and just kind of getting people affordable care, I really would consider myself like an advocate for caregiving, because I think this needs to be pushed at a national policy level, that we need to get ahead of this with our aging population. We're going to be facing a severe storm of care needs, and so many people are going to be dealing with it. But it's big. The magnitude is heartbreaking, because many people, for on average, for many people, caregiving for a family member is equivalent of another half to full-time job on top of whatever job they have to do. I think the reasons that the crisis is getting worse is also the cost of care has become extremely unaffordable in our country. Just the average statistic of the cost of home care help. If you need help for 40 hours a week so you can do your job, it's now upwards of over $80,000 a year.
Wow.
And that number was 60,000 only a few years ago and 40,000 a few years prior to that. It is inflating at triple the rate of inflation in our economy. So the cost of care is getting really out of control. And then on top of that, if you think about who the care workforce is, people aren't rushing to do this type of work. First of all, it's a heavily immigrant workforce, like anywhere from a quarter to a third are immigrants. And with recent kind of restrictions on immigration, the workforce is dropping. Then obviously during COVID and all that, you already had a big loss of workforce. So you're heading into a situation where the workforce is going down, cost of care is skyrocketing, and we're just societally hitting the point where the oldest of the baby boomers are turning 80. This year in 2026 is 80 years after 1946, post-World War II baby boom.
Right.
So we're just starting the wave of people hitting 80 in the biggest population cohort in our society. And 80 is typically when your care needs jump, from a long-term care perspective. The rates of dementia, about if you're lucky to live long enough, you have 1 in 3 chance of getting dementia at 80 or beyond, physical frailty, et cetera. So we have like the perfect storm here where we're going to have a skyrocketing need of care in our country, a rapidly dropping workforce to provide the care, and a care economy and a care industry that has completely antiquated and broken business models that is having an affordability issue. So I think a lot of people are going to be like, how can you pay $80,000 a year for care? If you have to calculate that I must make 120 plus pre-tax in order to pay that. So a lot of people will just drop out of the workforce and do it themselves. And I think that's something we need to get ahead of as a society.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about the numbers, really. I wish I could say they were. But also, you shared that you and your mom, you weren't happy with the care that you were receiving, and you were paying a lot for it, and then you feel guilty. You said something interesting at the very beginning. It's like, and someday I may need care as well. Yeah. We talk a lot about longevity risk and how it's one of those risks that just kind of bleeds into everything, especially as it impacts financial costs and whatnot.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the 3 most important challenges that individuals and family find when it comes to caregiving?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
So that's a great question. Okay, so I would say there might be more than three, but if I had to kind of bucket them into the three from my own experience, I'd say cost, quality, and reliability. In terms of caregiving, like most of the time when people find themselves in caregiving, their first thing think is, I can't do it all by myself. I need some help. I think, well, first, if you don't face that, please think about it, because most people should not be doing it all alone. It is very difficult. But I think when people find themselves in a situation, they start thinking, okay, how do I get help? I can't do this on my own. Right. So they turn to community, they turn to resources, they turn to companies, they ask their friends, they try to do it on their own. I think most people find the cost of care is extremely unaffordable for many people. I think that when people do find care that they can afford, they find quality to be a major issue. So that's kind of the life cycle of our own journey, is both in my grandfather's care, me and my mom, and then later in my wife's care, myself. You kind of try to find care options. You're like, okay, I can't afford it. But then the next thing is the quality sucks, or I feel bad or whatever. And then the reliability. I think these are major challenges that caregivers face. And these are all, I think, opportunities for improvement, but oftentimes many of the reasons that people tap out and just say, I'm going to do it myself. So I think if you'd like me to elaborate, I can kind of give you an exact example,
I'd love for you to give us an example. And then I want you to share with our audience how CareYaya comes in and helps to mitigate some of these challenges.
Yeah. And so let's say I'll give you an example. We have families that we're helping right now that are in the New York City metro area and kind of like the Northeast broadly. Yes. And you have like a daughter in her late 40s caring for her mother with Alzheimer's and going out and looking for help. The average rate in that metro area is $42 an hour to get care. So if you're just thinking, hey, 40 hours a week while I'm at my job, I need help, you're looking at north of $1,600 a week. So over the course of, the year, you can just do the math, but it's going to easily get to over $80,000 a year. So cost is like a major issue, and affordability. But more importantly, most of that money is not going to the care worker. While the average cost of care in America is $80-something thousand, the average worker pay in America is $33,000. And that's average, right? So many people are getting paid below that. So you have in New York metro area, a minimally paid care worker. The money you're paying to the care company, more than half is going to the company and other marketing and franchise fees and all that stuff, not going to the care worker. So the care worker is barely making a, living wage, so to speak. And as a result, that feeds back into the quality. That person is going to be super stressed out. That person is going to be looking for any other job at any other opportunity. Why wouldn't they work at Walmart? Why wouldn't they work at McDonald's? Why would they do this? And caregiving is very difficult work, by the way. So God bless that there are workers doing this type of work. Exactly. But they're often burned out. They're exhausted. They're not getting paid that much. They have their own stress. They have their own bills to pay. And then that feeds back into reliability. That many times I found on average in researching the care economy, over 15% of shifts in a given week were full out no-shows or multiple hours late, to the point where the family member can't even reliably count on it. So all that results in a lot of guilt that, oh, I'm leaving my mom and dad with this person who doesn't even want to be there, or is so stressed out, just doing the tasks, but oftentimes goofing off on their phone. I feel bad. Oftentimes the person doesn't show up on time, and then I have to call in sick for my own job. So I think a lot of families are like dealing with this kind of like compounding series of issues that, in my opinion, is a completely fault of like the care industry and lack of innovation. So that's really where I saw like a major opportunity of like, how can we put on our thinking caps and like do something to help people in a good way and in a good, sustainable, reliable way. So that was kind of like what inspired our innovation. And to your second question of what CareYaya does is, let's take that same exact example in New York. So CareYaya runs a tech platform that connects families across America with over 50,000 healthcare students at some of the top universities in the country to do the care. at highly affordable rates. We charge no fees or markups. It's fully social impact funded. So that exact example in New York City, instead of going to a local care agency and paying $42 an hour, a family can come to CareYaya's site or app and, just go to careYaya.org and very quickly, conveniently, in less than 2 minutes, book, schedule, and find NYU pre-medical students, Columbia University nursing students, or, pre-physician assistant students, Hunter College, Fordham. There's we have thousands of wonderful students in the metro area, and we're expanding all over the country. And these students are people who want to go into future clinical careers. They're very empathetic. They're extremely reliable. They're not just doing this for the money. They're doing this as a pathway to future graduate school. And the family can find them and book them and pay them at approximately $20 to $22 an hour. So it's like 40 to 50% lower cost than traditional care industry. So we find that it helps a lot of families who are priced out of the care market. It also has extreme reliability, like less than 0.5% of sessions have any sort of lateness. The students are unbelievably reliable and motivated. And the care quality is through the roof. Like after now tens of thousands of care sessions, the average rating is 4.87 out of 5 stars. Families rate each care session. And that's like orders of magnitude above like the traditional care economy, which on average has like a 3.2 rating. So, and it's really, it's not even us, it's the workforce. These students are wonderful people. They are very motivated. They want to go into future clinical careers. They're only doing this, for a year or 2 or 3 in their lives before going off to graduate school. And, they're doing a great job. I think the hidden kind of one benefit beyond just that is the intergenerational relationships have been forming. That's like the most heartwarming thing, that a lot of times I found myself in this situation with my grandfather. I think many families, we help find themselves where they're trying to convince the older person, hey, you need help. But then that person's like, well, I don't want babysitting, like, can you imagine? I see this sons and daughters arguing with their parents all the time on that. And reframing it as you're mentoring this 20-year-old pre-medical student is like a big reframe, that I think the older adult feels like I'm also, yes, I'm getting help, but I'm also helping mentor them and they're going to go to a future clinical career. And the young people love, kind of meeting older people in their community. And I think that's kind of like the coolest part of the program. So yeah, that's kind of like the high level on what we're doing.
I love that. Absolutely. Because there's a lot of wisdom. Older people want to give and share, and younger people can learn from.
Agreed.
So you said you're in the metro area of New York, and then I heard you say we're expanding. Are you able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. We started initially in our home market was Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. So like Duke University, UNC Chapel Hill. We expanded to New York City Metro. We're also all over Boston. We're in parts of Connecticut, Rhode Island. We're all over Washington, D.C., Atlanta, parts of Texas, Florida, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago. So we're kind of like quickly going nationwide. We have over 50,000 students on the platform, and we're active at over 35 different universities. If you think there's an opportunity for us to come to your area, definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to expand anywhere. We kind of grow grassroots, in terms of wherever professors and pre-health career advisors reach out to us, we operationalize the program at their university. And then wherever there's a need in the community, we typically partner with caregiver support groups, faith-based organizations, local hospitals, things like that. But we do zero advertising, zero kind of paid marketing. It's all grassroots built. And I think as a result of that, the cost savings can be passed on to the families. I think long-term, I really admire like Costco, as like a business, I feel like it's just like an amazing organization where it delivers very high quality product at highly affordable prices. And everyone in the ecosystem, from the employees to the customers, to the suppliers, like everyone is treated very well. And they kind of just go for kind of like large volume and like national scale. And I think that is a big opportunity, that I see in CareYaya, is that how do you just build something where over time you're building a lot of operational efficiencies, and as a result, lower cost and high quality is being passed through to the people in the ecosystem. And with CareYaya, the caregivers are being paid more than in any traditional care economy, solution, and the families are paying less. And it's really because a fairly efficient system is being scaled around the country. And I think that's really cool to see the impact.
I do too. And I love that you brought up the example of Costco, because I would agree with you. And I do believe when you're creating a business of any kind, and I know I'm not an expert on scaling, but just to hear that you want everyone to win. It doesn't have to be you're the winner and I'm the loser, or I'm trying to take advantage of. I have this robber baron kind of mentality. And pretty special to, especially in this type of industry where,
Yeah.
humans are so frail, they're older, there's so many needs.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, it could be so heartbreaking. What you're doing is just amazing. So if someone's a caregiver for an aging parent or a spouse, or their spouse has poor health,
Yeah.
what are some immediate steps that they can take?
I think first of all, number one step, get yourself enrolled in a caregiver support group. Whatever it is, typically your hospital, your faith-based organization, anything, multiple places are running support groups in every community. But if it's oftentimes geared towards dementia and Alzheimer's, there's tons of support groups. You can find them at Alzheimer's Association, et cetera. Cancer, been in a lot of support groups. But first, I would say plug into the support groups because you need to quickly share the journey with other people that are maybe a little bit ahead of you, that have gone through it and can give you advice, because there's going to be a lot of things that come up that you need help with. And frankly, sometimes you just want somebody to talk to, and
Exactly.
I think that I found caregiving, not to be dark, but it's very lonely and isolating, that when you're going through it, if your friends aren't, it's kind of like you don't want to talk about it because you're going to bring down the party, and they don't want to hear about it all the time because they want to talk about positive things. So I think that finding a like-minded group of people who are also going through it or have gone through it is absolutely critical. That's number one step you can take. I think number two is figure out very rapidly within your community and where you're at, and based on what resources you have available, what types of help options are available, whether it's respite, whether it's day programs. A lot of churches run dementia daycare programs where you can drop off someone for a few hours a day. There's also other kind of private organizations that run those. Whether it's some sort of other assistive support, you kind of need to start planning how you're going to manage the journey and figure out educational resources, that you can kind of gradually upskill yourself on, because oftentimes it's a multi-year journey ahead. And then I'd say financial planning is an absolutely key component of that. I hate to say it, it's so underappreciated. I mean, all the families that we help, man, I'm just I wish they would have planned for this 10 years ago or 5 years ago even. And I think it's a big opportunity for a public service announcements across the country, planning that you are going to one day get older and need long-term care, and or your mom or dad are going to need it, or your kid's going to have to manage it for you. I think it's a critical and essential element of financial planning that sadly most people aren't doing, and can't blame them. I think most people are not aware until this happens to them. And, I think most people don't want to think about it because it's sometimes unpleasant to think about. But if you just look at the probabilities and statistics, it might happen to you. And do you want to leave your spouse or your kids in that jam, or do you want to be a little bit proactive about it? But yeah, so I think that's absolutely essential. And the ones who plan, they have way more stress when it happens to them. I'll guarantee that. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. And we do talk a fair amount on Prime Life podcast about the financial impacts. Again, longevity.
Yeah.
You don't really know how long you're going to live for. And what you said was interesting and so poignant.
Yeah.
It's unpleasant to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Even, end of life is unpleasant to talk about, planning for that.
Yeah.
And I was sharing on one of the podcasts that my father-in-law, who's been passed away now 25 years, he was a World War II vet, and my husband's mom, she passed away actually before we got married. So he was a widower for quite a bit of time, but he had everything in alignment, what was going to happen, every step, all on a little index card.
That's
and
awesome.
He ended up passing away in his home. Unfortunately, he had a sudden heart attack, but if he wasn't able to stay at home, he knew he was going to go to the soldiers' home, which was close by because he volunteered there. And someone said to me, that was probably one of the greatest gifts that you could give someone. And I hadn't been so aware and thankful for that.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not something that people want to talk about or plan for. But as you indicated, it's so critical to have these conversations. And I agree with you that there should be public service announcements. And I don't see them. So maybe that's, you're an activist, you're an advocate. That's what I would categorize you, as well as a business owner, to help bring that to the forefront, because you're right. It's the trends are not going to go down. They're going to continue to go on the upward scale.
Yeah. 100%. I completely agree with you. And I think, I'm glad you tied it into this broader concept of longevity, because I do think people are living longer. I think not necessarily longevity equals healthy longevity. I
Right.
think there's like a lot of people are talking about this concept of lifespan versus health
Versus
span.
health span. Glad
And
you
I
brought
think
that
that,
up.
it's almost like the disconnect of lifespan versus health span is where the caregiving opportunity is, and
Right.
where the caregiving need is.
Mhm.
That if you now figure out through modern medicine how to live an extra 9 years, but 6 of those are in less healthy state,
Right.
then in effect society has to figure out that gap, because now you
Right.
have 6 years of being alive but needing sometimes part-time or full-time care,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's going to be on your family, or on society. And I think that that gap between lifespan and health span has been growing in recent decades, and I think resulting in kind of like this thing, combined with, I think, almost like a obsessiveness with living longer. And I would
Yes.
say I observe there's like maybe a decline in spirituality in the country, which results in this fear of death rather than kind of acceptance of death as like a part of life. And I just think that there's a lot of trends going on in society that make people hesitant and scared, to think about these things, which then results in wishful thinking and non-planning. And I think if people just kind of viewed it as like, hey, that's part of life, it's
Right.
not something that's scary. I think depending on what your spiritual beliefs are and everything, I think that people might be a little more thoughtful about how they deal with this. And as a result, their sons and daughters and spouses wouldn't be stuck in messy situations when that time came.
Mhm. Well, I love what you just said about the spirituality piece. I didn't think we are going to go down that road, but I'm going to
I
just
didn't
lift it
either.
up.
I'm sorry. I don't
But
want to go down
no,
the controversial road,
no,
but
it's
I
okay.
have deep thoughts about, I have
No,
pretty deep
and
thoughts about
we
these.
could have you on for another episode and just
Yeah.
talk about that. But I'm just going to lift that up a little bit before I have you kind of share final thoughts for our
Yeah.
audience.
Sure.
And then I do have a final question for you, although I think you've answered it.
Yeah.
I agree with you about the spirituality piece. And it really doesn't matter what religion that
Yeah.
you are born into or that you choose to believe. I think that's a significant piece that people maybe don't want to talk about because maybe it's controversial, or they think they're going down a lane that's too private. But I agree, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience. And I don't know if you want to share one little tiny story about that, or if not, that's okay. We can move on.
No, I mean, I'll share my observations about it. Even like, I think in general, like I am a deeply spiritual person, and I think that that has been a rock because I've had very difficult times in my life.
Sure.
And I think I often find without that, I don't know, where I would be.
Mhm.
But everybody, it's up to each individual,
Right.
on their life. But I do find when I think about this at a meta, like societal level,
Right.
I find there is a crisis of meaning, purpose, responsibility to oneself, to others, to society, that I think is exacerbated by a mass secularization of society.
Mhm.
And I think that it's like that is part of the caregiving. I think, the reality of like, do you care for your own family members? How do you deal with it? Does the person that's getting care, have they thought about you? And I think a lot of that is the fear of death. I mean, I think that generally probably directly correlated with someone's kind of like level of spiritual belief. And,
Yes.
I think that, and frankly, I would even say the chase of longevity and immortality. Like, I think that I actually think okay, since we're going to controversial stuff, I'll just say this.
It's okay.
Like I really do not like that so much capital allocation in this country by very large investment firms is going into, in my opinion, not only foolish but potentially unethical chase of immortality, when there are people who need help now in practical things like a good way and a graceful way to spend their final years. But if you look at the allocation of investment capital in this country, like the VCs are pouring tens and hundreds of billions into this like longevity and mortality. And why are no one focusing on caregiving? So I actually I've often thought about that back in the day, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, a lot of great care was being provided by community and faith-based organizations. And then like, look what happened with the assisted living and the nursing home industry. It got taken over by conglomerates, corporate chains, private equity. I mean, look at what's going on. It's like margins over mission, and I think that in this work, I think it has to be mission over margin. But, I think that kind of goes full circle with like people's like beliefs and how they think about the world.
I think these are really great points, and I hadn't quite thought of it that way. But especially with your background that you came to this work with.
Yeah.
And it's great to innovate and to want to look better. And, there's a lot of red light therapy. Again, lifespan, health span, there are many of us or some of us that try to take good care of ourselves because, again, but that doesn't mean, there are no guarantees in life, as the saying goes. There's no guarantee for tomorrow. But I do agree that perhaps more investment and time should be spent on looking at those that we're caring for now, because we do know, as you said, that it does require a lot to caregive for someone. And I think about my grandmother who lived with us, and my uncle really was the caregiver. And he's passed away recently, and I don't know how he did it. My grandmother was an interesting character, I'll just say that, and how exhausted mentally and physically. And I know that's something that you kind of lift up a little bit. But as we get to the end of our conversation, what are a couple of key takeaways that you want our audience to remember about our conversation today? And then I'm going to head into my last question for you.
Yeah, I'd say kind of my number one thing is, if you find yourself in a caregiving situation, take immediate steps to get as much resources and information as possible. Don't delay, because a preponderance of studies and evidence has come out in recent years that within 1 year of somebody becoming a caregiver, up to a third of people report significant mental health challenges, including depression and severe anxiety that lasts for a long time, even after the caregiving is over. Take steps quickly. Moreover, 1 in 4 people report within less than 1 year of becoming a caregiver major physical health issues. We are helping thousands of family caregivers across the country, and you have no idea how many times we see people, the caregiver, end up in ER with heart issues. I mean, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And when they're in the ER with heart issues, they're checking in on their wife or their mom or dad and seeing how it's going. So I think that the amount of stress that people are under, I mean, it's like crazy, because they realize suddenly they're going to be the main provider and they're going to have to do this on the side. How are they going to manage? They're going without sleep. They're constantly, adrenaline is up. So I'd say number one thing is just like, you're in for like going into a battle or a war even. So you want to take proactive steps to get as many resources as you can. And then probably, I think, the second thing is just like finding ways to get support so that you don't end up doing it yourself. I think whether it's like respite care, if you can afford it, or whether it's like sharing the burden with members of your family, or it's finding day programs or something. But I think that if people don't very quickly find and plan for that, I think it often becomes very unmanageable, and then has a second and third order impact on their ability to do their job. Oftentimes the sandwich generation, I find, is probably the most stressed, where you're taking care of your kids and you're doing that for your mom or dad. Like, can you imagine, like, the time for yourself goes to zero basically, or negative. You don't even have time to sleep. So I think those things are like very actionable, practical things that people can and should do.
I agree with you 100%. So our final question for you is, you shared your background. You can really do anything at all that you want. You're intelligent. You have good credentials educationally. Why do you wake up every day and do what you do, Neal?
Yeah, great question. I think because I can see the impact on individual people. I find the most satisfaction is hearing about the families that we helped, especially if they were struggling to find other care options or having an affordability issue or rationing the hours. I think that just like the human impact, I think is really cool to see. Similarly, the impact on the students, many of them going out in their community and helping people. I think it reframes the way they think about what their purpose in life is. And I think that, to kind of go full circle back to the point, I think we as a society have sometimes become disconnected and lost a lot of purpose and meaning of like, why are we here? What are we supposed to do? And I think that goes kind of across the younger population, the older population. And I think while technology is a good thing, I think sometimes technology has isolated us to some degree. So I find a lot of purpose and meaning in bringing people together, oftentimes helping each other at very difficult times in their life journey. And I think that's very motivating. Sometimes like you can't measure that, but I think you can feel it, and I really enjoy that. I think about it. I wake up every day very excited to, go to work.
Well, it's amazing. And
Yeah.
I love hearing that. So if individuals want to get in touch with you or an organization, what's the best way? We will put everything in the show notes.
Great. I think if you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is probably the most best way. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Neal in the middle initial K and then last name Shah, SHAH. And then, or you can just go to our website, CareYaya.org. I think either.
Okay, great. So again, I know you're super busy, Neal, and I appreciate it because I reached out to you on LinkedIn because I saw what you were doing. I saw the conversations. I saw who you were connected with. I have to have Neal on Prime Life Podcast. So thank you for allowing me that. Thank you for spending time with me today. And for our listeners, we thank you. Share the podcast with your friends and family. And we appreciate everyone. And Neal, again, thanks for spending time with me today. And everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Mary.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.